Hi everyone, it's Karen from Karen's Quilts, Crows, and Cardinals blog and Redbird Quilt Co. here for the next installment of our 2016 free motion quilt along using the Lou's Balloons growth chart by the World of Susie B. We've had a lot of lessons so far on pin basting, on how to quilt that, on doing the piecing for our nice little fabric panel, but now we're going to get started at actually free motion quilting. So let me just give you a little bit of the background. We've got our machine set up for free motion quilting. I have a darning foot on my machine, and it's actually a closed toe foot. It has an adjustable screw on it, which I'll show you in my blog post. The nice thing about the Janome Horizon setup is that the convertible foot has a spring on it, so you can adjust it to the amount of batting that you have underneath your needle. So you want it to rest kind of close to the top. You don't want it to be pushing your fabric, but you want it to be close enough that the stitches will complete stitching. Sometimes you'll get skipped stitches if your foot is too far away from your fabric. So I'm set up with a 7511 needle. I have Aurifil 50 weight thread in the top and in the bobbin, and I'm using the recommended color from our supplies list, and it was color 2600 Dove. I have that in the top and the bobbin right now. I have a slider, a Supreme slider on my machine. I'm working on the Janome Horizon, so the feed dogs are actually still up on recommendation from Leah Day, and I've covered them with a piece of template plastic and using blue tape to keep that template plastic down. My machine is clean, and if your machine requires oiling, then you should make sure that that's the case as well. You need to check with your manufacturer on that. And of course I've done all of the stitching that I recommended in the how to stitch that in our previous post, where I stitched on the black border here with Aurifil 12 weight thread in the top. I didn't stitch in the ditch, I just stitched about a 1/4 inch out inside of the ditch so that I'm actually right on the back black fabric. I also stitched the growth chart line, just the straight line. I did not do the tick marks, the 1 and 1/4 inch tick marks yet. I've also stitched with the walking foot the balloon strings with the Aurifil 12 weight thread and my walking foot. Now I'm going to leave this top open here on the Janome because I have better view of where I'm going to stitch while that is open. So we're going to start by stitching around the perimeter of Lou, and I find anymore that if I stitch just outside of the subject lines, not right on the line, but just outside the line, that eventually once all your quilting is done, it'll give it a little bit of a lift. Now, I haven't entered anything like that into a judged show, so I'm not quite sure what judges would think about it, but what I think is that it lifts the whole subject up and makes it very pleasing to the eye. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to get started by stitching around the outside, and when I'm done with that, I'm going to go in and stitch these swirls. As we talked about in a previous lesson, if you recall that I had the whiteboard out and we stitched we practiced our motif on paper before we are going to actually stitch it. So we did a little bit of practice here on our motifs, on our pebbles, and what we're going to do. So that is something that we did in a previous lesson. If you missed that lesson, be sure to go back to the YouTube playlist and pick that up before you get started. And it's always good, always good to practice your motif on paper. So that's why the whiteboard comes in handy, the dry erase marker board, because you can practice the motif on paper and you can get that memory, your muscle memory set up in your head and with your hands, so that when you're stitching it, it becomes more second nature and you're not guessing which way you're going to turn next. Now, we're going to be doing this to have fun and to learn. So if I make a mistake, I'm going to point it out and keep going, because this is our panel where we're learning, and no one is going to scrutinize what we did right, wrong, or indifferent. There is no right or wrong. So I'm going to do what comes to mind. It may even be different than what we sketched out on the whiteboard. But let's get started. I'm going to position myself so that when I'm done, I know I can enter the panel here into my first swirl. So I'm going to start in an area that's close to that. And remember, I'm stitching right outside of the fabric line that's shown. I'm going to start by taking my needle down while I'm holding my top thread and back up again, and that will bring the bobbin thread, if you pull on the top thread, it'll bring the bobbin thread up through the fabric, and I just pull it out with my scissors that I have on a lanyard at all times. We're going to hold those away and take a stitch or two in place just to lock the stitches. Now again, you're not going to do that if you're working on a juried or judged quilt top. This is just for a small gift to give to somebody. If you're going to be entering something into a show, you would actually pull the bobbin thread to the top. You wouldn't take any stitches in place necessarily. You would leave the threads dangling, and later on you would tie a knot and then bury them inside the layers of your quilt top. We're not going to cover that stitching right now, just other than what I just mentioned. So as I mentioned before a few times, I always start with my needle in the down position on my machine, my particular machine. If you start with the needle in the down position, ask it to be down, then it'll stop that same way so that you can reposition your hands, take out a few pins, do whatever you need to do without your fabric shifting underneath your needle. So I'm going to get going. I'm going to go at a fair pace. I'm not going to go too fast or too slow. I'm going to trim these threads though and get them out of my way. Later I'll come back and trim them flush, but for right now I'm just going to trim them and push them out of the way. Now you're going to find that you may be more comfortable going clockwise versus counterclockwise. I try to go whatever seems to be the easiest path, and right now I'm looking and it seems like I'm going to actually go this way. You might also find that your machine likes to go a certain direction. So I've already locked my stitches, and I'm going to go ahead and start stitching around the perimeter of blue. And as you see, it looks like my hands are flat down, but they're really not laying flat. I'm holding my elbows up for one thing, and I'm also got mostly just my fingertips controlling where the fabric is going. Now, do you hear that clicking noise? I'm not sure if you can hear it or not, but what that is an indication to me is that I have some sort of burr on my needle. I'm going to just keep going so that I don't bore you with changing my needle. But normally when you hear that kind of a ripping or a clicking noise, it sounds to me like my needle needs to be changed. So I'm coming up against a spot where this pin is almost in my way. I might be able to sneak by it, so I'm going to just sneak by it to save some time and to keep going. Well, maybe I won't sneak by it. Let's see. I'm just going to twist a little bit. Well, I'm not going to get around that pin. How about if we take it out? Yeah, that could be a trouble too. Yeah, okay, well now I've got myself in there and buried, so I'm just going to tuck the pin underneath the foot and keep moving along. So I got a little bit of a bump on Lou's nose there. So normally you would take that pin and move it out of your way, okay? But you can see what I'm doing. I'm kind of just going around, just around the perimeter of Lou's body and outlining it. So I'm going to just keep going, and I'm using my hands to move the panel underneath the needle. If you've not done this before, it's an interesting event. It's kind of fun. I am going to take this pin and move it out of the way before I can get it out of the way. So there's one pin down. Now I'm going into territory which is kind of hard to see, so every now and then I'm going to stop and make sure that I know where I'm headed. Alright. And I may have to tweak my neck a little bit to see what's coming up next. Whenever I want to move my hands, I'm almost always going to stop. I'm looking at my tension, and it was set for what I had on my walking foot. Now is a good time to bring this up. When you first start stitching, you always want to stop and check the tension on the back and on the front and make sure it looks good. Now my tension was a little bit too loose because I was set for the 12 weight thread. So I'm gone ahead and upped my tension to between 4 and 5 is what looks good on my machine, because this tension looks a little bit too loose so far. You can already see that Lou is starting to get a little dimension to him. So let me just keep going around here. I'm going to stop at the balloon strings because I don't want to stitch over them with this light colored thread. I'm going to just take a couple of stitches in place, lift my foot and my needle up, and jump across to the other side of those, to the other side of the balloon strings, and then put my needle back down, take a couple more stitches in place to lock them, and then keep moving. All right. And let me go ahead and finish getting around Lou here. And I'm not worrying too much about being right on the line with this. This is not important. It'll look fine when we're all done. So don't stress over following right along the line. Just get as close as you can, what you're comfortable with. And just keep, whoops, I apologize for that. Just keep moving along. I'm going to move this pin out of the way so it doesn't get caught. All right. And I'm going to go around Lou's little feet. I think while I'm here, I'm going to kind of pivot inside of the stripes on Lou's legs and come back out again. And I'm going to do that again up here on the top. Wherever you can pick up a little stitching is always good. I'm going to go inside of this one and back out again. Again, I'm not worrying too awful much about the accuracy here. We're just getting used to moving the fabric panel underneath the needle, underneath the machine. So far I've outlined all of Lou. I've got a little bit of hiccup here around his nose where this pin got in the way. So I'm going to go ahead and move that pin now. If I was really particular about this, I could always go back, rip those stitches out, and then re-stitch in that particular area, making sure that I cover my old stitches with my new stitches to kind of lock the stitches together. And that's not unusual. That's something that occasionally you'll have to do, but I'm not going to worry about it too much with this session. Now listen, we're going to go right into Lou's body now, and we're going to do the swirls that we mentioned in the when we were using the whiteboard. So I'm really close to, whoops, a swirl and a pin. So let me go ahead and remove this pin and get it out of the way. We don't want to be running into any pins with our machine. That's not recommended. Sometimes, most of the time I can take them off with my gloves on, so that's good. Now the key thing here is we don't want to quilt too densely, so I'm just going to follow some of these swirl lines that are here and do my little loop-de-loops. So here's a swirl. I'm going to get going. I'm going to follow it in, come back out, maybe do a little bit of a loop-de-loop, and then go into another swirl. You don't have to follow the pattern exactly how it is. Don't worry about that. Let it inspire you, but don't let it control you. Because you might find that you can't always follow the pattern exactly. So I'm doing the little swirls and then the loop-de-loops and a swirl and back out again, a loop, a swirl, and back out again. So you're just going to find your way across this whole panel doing that. And actually I'm going to work from the right to the left, so I'm working my way up this side. I'm going to do a swirl, a loop, a swirl, work back out of it, do a loop, do a swirl, work back out of it again, a loop. And you know what, you don't always have to do a loop. You can kind of fall right back into the next swirl. It depends on what's comfortable, what's nearby. And what I'm finding is that I'm quilting quite densely over here, and I don't know if I want to do that. So I'm going to try to open it up a little bit and not quilt so dense that Lou is getting totally knocked down. I'm going to work my way down, swirl, and the loop, and a swirl in a different direction, and a loop, and another swirl, and the loop. I'm going to stop because I need to reposition my hands, get my quilt sandwich straight. I did a loop, and now I'm going to do a swirl and the loop and a swirl, and another swirl. Whatever works for you. Maybe a loop to travel around here. Now, I'm coming up close to Lou's ears here. At one time when I get to this section again, I'm going to want to go around and outline the ears, Lou's ears on this. So let me keep going here though so that we don't run out of time. I'm going to keep doing swirls and a loop, and a swirl in the opposite direction, and a loop. And no, it's very hard for you to see what I'm doing because of the thread that I'm using is actually complements the fabric. But I'm just going through and doing my swirls and my loops, and I'm just going to keep doing that. And you know what? If you get yourself into a jam and you're trapped in a corner somewhere, don't panic, especially if you're using 50 weight thread. Just go ahead and, what Karen McTavish would say, sneak around. Basically, use one of your old lines and get yourself out of that jam by backtracking on something that you have here. Now here I am close to this ear again. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over here and I'm going to outline this ear, okay? I'm going to outline, of course, around the outside of it because of the color of thread that I have on. And I'm going to come out then, maybe come down in here and do a little loop, a little swirl, work my way back in, and then get up here into the head, doing swirls and looping as I need to move around. Swirl and a loop, and a swirl and a loop. I want to get over here into this area a little bit. Okay, we're nearing the end. We're doing just little swirls and some more loops. There's no right or wrong. Remember that. There is no right or wrong here. So we've got pretty much Lou's body covered. And you know what? We're going to want to go down and stitch this bee next. I think I'm going to stop this video right here so it's not too awful long. And so we're going to stop here, but he looks really good. The only thing that I haven't done yet is maybe stitched around the face here on the body. I think we should probably do that. And also fill in on these legs here. I did a few of them, but we need to come back in and fill in on the other legs. So really what you can do if you wanted to is you can kind of find your way back down to that area. You can trace back what you did, or you can make a new path, because no one's ever going to notice that in your stitching. The thing is that you don't want to be too awful dense with what you do, so you have to kind of use a little bit of caution there. I'm working my way over so that I can outline Lou's face here. Let me go ahead and do that, okay? And let's just sneak down in here and do the legs. We're going to come up here, do this leg, sneak down and do this leg, and sneak down and do this leg. Alright, so we've got Lou's face outlined, we got his little stripes on his legs outlined, we've outlined his ears. He's looking pretty good. We may come back in later and do his eyes, but let's not do that right now. But what do you think? Was that not as hard as we thought? Don't worry about too much about your tension. You're going to get your foot and your hand speed together eventually. I'm sorry, about your stitch length. Don't get too upset about that. Just go ahead and get some stitching. You can see there's some nice texture in there. And then we'll pick up again in the next video and we'll get the bumblebee and the pebbles done. Okay, thanks for stopping by. It's Karen from Karen's Quilts, Crows, and Cardinals blog. And we'll be back for the next installment real soon.